All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
Well, this will be part one if there's a part two. But since we announced we were going to do that, we haven't had time to
Mhm.
do part one, part twos. So I think we've done one where we had a part one, part two.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it was kind of a post hoc thing.
yeah, so we'll try to get a little social stuff in later, but we're going to start with some fitness. And I released a video on my fitness channel doing the hip hinge. And what people don't know about movement is we can kind of break it down into upper body push, upper body pull, and those can be vertical or horizontal or anything in between. But when it
Yep. Yeah, this is why we try and do this in the afternoon, but I was uh busy feeling like garbage yesterday and busy this afternoon, so yay.
Okay, so I think we're good now. But when we talk about lower body movements, we kind of break it down into a squat pattern and a hinge pattern. And I did a video on the hip hinge. It's about 7 minutes, and realistically, I think it might be the best one I've posted. Uh, for not only just in performance, but in the fact that this movement, if you master it, is going to save you a lot of pain for the
Mhm.
rest of your life. Talking about quality of life, or well, and realistically, the quality of your life as you go later kind of determines the quantity of life, because
Mhm.
the worse you feel, the less you do, the more you decline. So, uh, so yeah, did you want to just dive into it, or did you want to go over?
No, let's just jump in.
Okay.
And because the kind of the key to me when you're talking about the hip hinge and something that can be a little difficult to explain to people is but I assume you're going to answer this is the difference between why you split up the hinge and the squat motion because uh on the surface they seem like the same movement.
Yes, and you realistically you hinge in a squat,
Hmm.
but the hinge is going to be posterior dominant. So you're talking about your glutes, your hamstrings, your spinal erectors, everything on the backside of your body. If you do a pure hinge, that's pretty much what you're working. Where a squat, you're going to get a hinge because your hips bend, but you also get anterior recruitment, such as the quadriceps in the front side of the legs, because your knees are bending as well. So in order to do the movement, you have to be able to re-extend your knees. Whereas on the backside, you have to re-extend your hips. So a squat is a little bit more all-inclusive. And when I do programming, you can shift the emphasis one way or another. But if you don't know how to hinge, you can't squat. Hinge is a prerequisite to a
Hmm.
squat. Uh, but yeah, let's just go into it. I've gotten a little bit more streamlined on my intros, and so hopefully, where's my play button? Nope, that's not it. There it is. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to go over the hip hinge. Our three rules on all our major complex movements are: they have to be safe, they have to positively affect the tissue, and they have to translate to real life. But without mastering this movement, none of your leg or core exercises where you have load on your whole body are actually going to do any of those three things. If you have a proper hip hinge, you're going to exponentially lower your chances of hurting your back. You're going to actually engage the muscle groups we're trying to engage, and in this case, mostly the glutes, but also the hamstrings and the spinal erectors in a supporting role. And then also it's going to translate to real life, because you're going to be. Did I do that with sound?
Yep, yep, yep,
Okay, good.
yep. We
Okay.
got sound. I had a thought already. Uh oh, the three you said the three complex movements. You might want to point out what those are. The I see you're talking squat, deadlift, hip thrust,
Did I say
or
the three complex movements? I said the three requirements for any of the complex movements,
ah,
which was: it has to be safe, it has to positively affect
okay,
the tissue,
yes.
and it has to translate to real life. So,
Okay.
yeah. Able to do all these movements such as reaching over and picking up a child off the ground, or even just a piece of paper. People underestimate how many times back injuries happen just reaching down to pick up something light because you're not paying attention. Number one cause of back injury. Question. If you were to have to guess.
I'm gonna say
Acute
getting
back
out of,
injury, not chronic. Acute back injury.
oh, I don't know then.
A sneeze.
Seriously.
Yes. And if you really break down a sneeze as in the forces and the biomechanics of it, it makes sense, because not only bending over, but bending over and twisting is the best way to herniate a disc, because we have spinal processes going down the center, but if you twist, you kind of open up a spot for that disc to pop out the other side. And when you're sneezing, if you're surprised by it, you might be talking to somebody or just being polite, you turn away and you sneeze, so you flex the spine really rapidly under a high force and twist at the same time. So yeah, sneezes are dangerous. So brace your core.
I
Body.
wasn't thinking acute, and the first thing I thought of was how often people tweak their back just getting out of bed or standing up from a chair.
Yeah, we got the
And
SIs. We're adults.
and that's
Sleep
what
injuries, sit
yep.
injuries, stairs injuries, sneeze injuries.
And that's kind of what you're talking about there, which is that if you are deconditioned, if your body isn't used to firing its muscles, and then as you pointed out in the hinge movement, you've got spinal erectors in support, so you're making your body used to doing that. If it's not used to that, so basically what happens is if you are laying down or sitting down for a long time, you've I mean, the way I don't know if you have a better way to phrase it, but the way I explain it to people is your glutes basically turn themselves off.
Yeah, and a lot of people in the therapy industry hate the term amnesia, but I don't know why they hate it. I have never gotten a good explanation, because it's kind of true. It, it's it's more correctly described as a fatigue, because what happens is the muscle sits in an elongated state for a long period of time. And well, we talk about the receptors in the muscle that measure stretch. Well, they're kind of constantly going off when it's elongated, and then they just get tired. You know, the nerves use energy too. And so this muscle's in an elongated state for a long period of time. The nervous system basically kind of shuts off to some degree, and then doesn't react properly when you stand up.
So what's happening there is those muscles that you said were supposed to be supporting, your body's trying to overcompensate, and those muscles are doing more work than they should. They're doing the work instead of the support. And
so
then
your low back muscles, which also go over the hip, and your hamstrings, which also go over the hip, basically grab you from both sides and try to pull you up, instead of that big giant muscle that's right in the middle that's supposed to be the prime mover. Now, where this extends and where this movement is so particularly useful is if you don't master this movement and you start tucking your butt under yourself or just arching the back to do a bent over movement of any kind, what, again, picking up a piece of paper, something natural we do all the time, then you re-support that amnesia to include while you're doing movements, instead of it turning right back on. So the best thing to do if you sat for a long time, as soon as you get up, is to do a couple reps of what we're about to see here, to get basically it turns your nervous system back on. Yeah, and don't underestimate it, even if you're a big, strong, conditioned person, because if the right parts of your body aren't working, a lot of times that results in a spasm, because something like your quadratus lumborum, which is a support muscle, a stabilizer, gets called into action to create movement, and it says, wait, that's not what I'm supposed to be here for, and then I'm going to be angry for 3 days. So the hip hinge movement is going to allow us to do that. And I'm going to give you a few tips and tricks that I use with my clients. And for those, if you're having trouble with this movement, I recommend having a wall and some sort of stick. A broomstick would work, anything that is nice and straight and at least yay long, because you're going to need it to go across your back. So before I do that, I want to differentiate between the hip hinge, which is what we're going to go over, which is the head of your femur spinning in that. And this is something people need to remember is your hip is a ball and socket joint. And it's very complex, but ultimately, if this is the pocket in that pelvis, this is the head of the femur going in, it needs to be able to have full 360 movement, including rotating in that socket. If it doesn't, then you see the hip, the pelvis itself moves around, which is going to cause movement in the SI joint, which is the sacroiliac joint, which is where the spine connects to the pelvis. That's no bueno. We don't want a whole lot of movement there. It's a very precarious joint as it is, because that sacrum sits on top of the pelvis, and then a bunch of ligaments come in and try to connect it there with muscles crossing over the top of that. So it's not like a socket joint where you've got a divot that a nice ball fits into. It's kind of just sitting on top of it with a bunch of other stuff holding it in.
It's why for anyone who has been paying attention for some reason, when we did the program for me, and you've shown some sample programs that you've done for others, and you see a lot of different hip movements as active rest in your programs. Bird dogs, fire hydrants, clamshells, because you've got to get that hip moving, and you've got to get it moving in different directions, so that 360 motion you talked about is not a surprise to your body.
Mm-hmm. And not only different directions, but from different force vectors. So like a quadruped exercise is where you start, where you're on all fours, and you might lift it straight out to the side, might lift it back, and you may even roll it forward. But the force vector is going from your back towards the floor. So the direction of gravity. Now you stand up, the force vector is different, because if you lift your leg out to the side, it's going from your hip down towards the floor from an upward direction. So you've got to change all these angles and then be able to do it in space, which is like where we bring in exercises like the single leg RDL, or even the upgraded version, the airplane, where you go forward like you're doing an RDL and then you spin on your hip socket. So the sky's the limit, but the key is start slow and learn the basics first. That's why we're starting with the most basic: 2 feet down, hinging at the hip, where the ball and socket is actually spinning in the joint, not the other things around it. Socket in the hip versus anterior pelvic tilt. Okay, so you see the difference. If I'm hinging, it looks the same from here down, but... And for all of you training for looks, notice how much bigger my belly looked when I did the pelvic tilt. So if you're like, I got a good, maybe try getting in good posture and see what that does as well. Also with the people that I want a big chest, I bench press all the time, I want a big chest, and they were like this, I'm like, how about pull your shoulders back?
Yep.
Automatically you have a bigger chest. Watch my low back as I go in to that anterior pelvic tilt. So we want to start from the right position. If this is a problem for you and you have trouble straightening out, then get a wall, shoulders, butt, head all against the wall, put your hand here, and then tighten up your abs. Like if anybody with an older brother would know this, someone's trying to punch you in the stomach and you're trying to take that blow without losing all your air. So start from the right position. If you're locked here, then try to push it forward. If you can't do that, then hit those hip flexor stretches, maybe some foam roller stretches where you're pushing those hips forward, because we don't want arching of the low back. So again, hinge, pelvic tilt. I said something kind of important there. You also need to differentiate between what's a habit and what is actual structural. So if you're trying as hard as you can, you're squeezing your butt as hard as you can, you're flexing your abs as hard as you can to try to get straight, and you still have that tilt, time for some of those couch stretches, some of the hip flexor stretches, the hip clocks. I like to sit on the ground with a foam roller right under my SI joint, which is Let me put my cursor on it right there, and just lay there. Lay there and let that foam roller just push up on that SI joint, and you'll feel the stretch up in the front side of your hip.
Um, yeah, I see that a lot going to a box gym that you see a lot of the Instagram butt model squat. And I don't know if it's just because they're trying to show their butt off or they think, um, did we talk about this last time? I think we talked about this when we were doing when we did our squat video, watching your squat video was we were taught to look up when we were in high school being taught to squat by coaches. Well, you would look up if you're trying to compensate for something else. If you just do it because you're going to put some curve in your back.
Mhm.
So I see a lot of people kind of looking up and arching their back when they go down, and you get the double whammy because another thing I see a lot of people doing is hips forward. Well, again, this is why we don't say straight back. We say neutral because your back's not straight. You want your hips in neutral. I see a lot of people trying to push their hips forward, thus adding more arch to their back when they're doing a squat or a deadlift. You want to lock the hips in neutral. And to your point, if you feel like you're locking in neutral, but there's still some, some slight hinge, some slight arch or whatever there, then yeah, you got some hip tightness. And this is where your point about mindfulness comes in as a principle of fitness. Is one of the reasons we're recording late today is because working out took longer because my stupid right hip wouldn't release, and it was squat day, and you can't do squats if you've got tight hip flexors because your body's going to try and overcompensate because it can't make that movement. So I had to work and work and work to get that right hip to release, relax, and move fluidly.
Well, and this is one of the limitations of short form too, which is why you don't see me on the Instagram or TikTok model, or
Mm-hmm.
you brought up the Instagram model. They're going off other short form. They're all copying each other basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the quick buzzworthy way to say it is stick your butt out when you squat. Stick your butt out, stick your butt out, chest out, butt out, chest out, which I use that cue, but only as a reminder cue, not as again, this is a 7-minute video, but I just spent a whole hour-long session doing nothing but the things you see here with a client because he's got chronic back pain. And he has, even though he's been doing the proper exercises, he still has weak glutes because he's not utilizing them. So we took the opportunity of just us two, he's normally in a group, that he just happened to be alone that time, to only work on this and feel this and feel this and start making it automatic. And he's drilling this every day at home where he's supposed to be anyways. So butt out, chest out, yeah, that's a great cue, unless you're sticking your butt out in what's right here, this pelvic tilt, versus sticking your butt out in a hinge pattern.
Yeah.
Big difference, because now my spine is in overextension versus it stays neutral through the whole movement. Also, the hinge is not just bending over, because now, again, that femur is not rotating. All the movement is in the low back, and the hamstrings tighten up to try to stop you. So, difference between pelvic tilt and just bending over from the hinge. Okay, so how do I do this? This is where the wall comes in. What I usually do with someone who has trouble with this is have them start against the wall and take a little bit of a step out, and then put their hands on their hips so that you can feel the actual pelvis moving forward. Touch your butt against the wall, then bring it back. Go out a little further, push back, touch your butt against the wall. Now you don't want to rock back on the heels. Touch your butt against the wall, and you keep going out until.
Yeah, filming these things is really hard because I had to make a point to talk about not rocking back on the heels because you can't see my feet. And if I had done it in a way where you can see my feet and everything, I would have been like this big on the screen.
Yeah.
So the camera work is not my strong point, and we're still getting it down. That's actually the reason for the delay of the last videos, but I got one down. I think I'll have up by tomorrow. All right.
Until you're reaching a position where you'd be able to reach down towards the ground. So for a deadlift, reaching down to the bar. If you're doing a Romanian deadlift, RDLs, you're starting at the top, but you want to master this movement. And you just work further and further until you are getting to a good position. If you feel something tighten up on the way, this is an evaluation tool to know what you need to be stretching out. If that's the front side of the hip that tightens up, you'll want to do your tensor fascia stretches or some hip flexor stretches along the way. So good drill for establishing that hinge. Now, if you're having trouble not bending over and losing posture the whole time, that's where the stick comes in. Behind the back, good posture.
Not many more useful tools than a dowel rod or a PVC pipe, by the way. I've seen some, I haven't dove into their stuff, but I saw some stuff the other day where people are starting to poop on this kind of stuff. And I need to know their reasons and the rationality. I guarantee you it's a straw man. I guarantee you it's something to the extent of people become dependent on it. But that just tells me they don't have enough knowledge to wean somebody off of the thing you started them with.
Yes, it is a tool. It's kind of like way back when I kind of early on when I was getting into biomechanics and training, and I was a little bit of a free weight snob. Well, a machine is just a tool. And there's a lot of people in the fitness community that, you get off the machines, get on the free weights. It's not my wrench's fault if I use it to try and hammer in a nail and I smash my thumb.
Well,
it's operator error.
Yeah, not to derail onto a completely different side topic. Maybe it'll be a topic on its own, but dynamic weights for performance, but machines are great for volume because you can safely lift a lot more because of the restriction on the motion and the stability in the joints. But also somebody new that doesn't have that stability, you can push them a little harder in their volume training and then use dynamic weights lightly to establish that stability. Okay, so but that's a completely that's a 3-hour topic if we wanted it some other day.
Yep.
And then hinge forward, not pushing that stick out. All right, I push the stick out, I lost back position. I keep it neutral, I'm keeping my neutral back position. All right, so master that movement where all the movement is in the hip and none of it in that lower part of the spine. Again, until you get to a deep enough.
I use these as a part of my warm-up with a lot of my clients too. Especially if they have trouble, they keep relapsing onto that bent over position. And realistically, the longer you've done something wrong, the less natural it feels to do it right. So you have to keep reminding people or reminding yourself, if it feels natural, it's probably wrong at this point. And that's why my back hurts. So I need to make the right way feel natural. And that's going to take, if it took you 30 years to have the back pain, it won't take you 30 years to not have it, but it might take, several weeks of doing it the right way to repattern.
Yes. And the glass half full there is that even if you don't have it down, if you concentrate on it after several weeks, you'll at least feel what it is to be correct. And so you'll know when you go off, right?
Well, the 4 stages of motor learning are unconscious incompetence, which means you suck and you don't know it. Conscious incompetence, which means you still suck, but you can feel it. You can feel and see it. Conscious competence, which means you can do it right, but you have to focus on it the entire time. And then unconscious competence, which means you can do it right without thinking. So
I don't have a mirror set up in front of my rack like you do, which if I have someone I'm training, that's a problem. I need to address that at some point. But for me, I've gotten to where I can just feel it. If I'm shifting while I'm squatting, I know it. I don't need to see it in the mirror because I've been doing it enough and I'm mindful enough that, and if I'm not, then I know it because my knee yells at me and I go, oh, I need to pay attention to what I'm doing.
Well, and again, that's another tool to wean somebody off of. CrossFit gyms, one of the good things and bad things about them is they don't use mirrors. And that's great for developing body awareness.
Mhm.
But if you have zero body awareness, you need all the cues you can get to develop it. And so that's where a mirror comes in handy. And then you wean people off of the mirror. I still use the mirror for some things, but at the same time, I will do my warm-ups looking at the form and then getting to my working sets and try to feel it as I go on those things. Or if I only use it if I find I've developed a bad habit and I need to redo it. But most times, I'll just get you got a phone, film yourself. Don't do it for Instagram. Film yourself to look at yourself and then to reevaluate your form, because I never have a coach. So I have to be able to coach myself. And mirrors throw your perspective off, because if, like you say, you're squatting, you never see proper depth because you're looking at yourself from the top down.
Position that you can do all of your training reaching down to pick up the bar, kettlebell, dumbbell, whatever it is. So another version of that you can do, let me turn the other direction, is you can set that straight up your back and go from there. And you will feel, if you lose that back position, so straight like this, there should be some space between your lower back and that stick. And if you feel that bottom part of your back touch the stick, that means you're losing position on the way down. So again, you can train that. I recommend doing both of those till you're just really comfortable in that position. So anytime we do a hinging motion, I mean, even the bridges off the ground, you want to focus on that. Now, from a tissue perspective, if I'm able to do that, my primary mover is going to be my glutes. If you're just bending over and there's no spin of that femur in that hip socket, the glutes never stretch out. All that stretches out is your spinal erectors on the way down, and then eventually your hamstring as you get lower. But if that joint, if that bone rotates in the joint, then the glutes actually stretch out, and because they are being pulled to their optimal stretch, they're going to be the prime mover, and then you squeeze those butt cheeks to get back to the top. So starting from a good position, abs tight, lumbar spine in its natural position, no extra tilt of the hip, and then pushing back where everything moves at once. If you don't have a stick, you can use your hand like this, kind of as a tactile cue, because you'll feel it push against that. So master this, then wean off all the other cues until you're comfortable with it, and then you can start adding load. If you're still uncomfortable with it, go find a good trainer that can help you, watch you, take you through those or similar drills so you can master it. And I don't have you in front of me, so the common disclaimer obviously is.
All right, it's just disclaimers after that.
All right, so I forgot we were doing this. I'm an idiot. I meant to film myself doing something. Two things that I would add is and this is really useful when I'm first trying to teach someone to hip hinge, and I think you've used this before. I think I mentioned this because when you were doing the quadruped hips back to try and figure out get your squat position, I do something like that when I'm teaching the hip hinge, especially if it's just really alien to someone for some reason, is basically what you were doing there against the wall, but on your knees. So that way there's less movement, there's less balance. There's just push your butt back between your heels. Just keep doing that till that starts to feel natural. And then stand up. Something else I found, and I don't remember where I picked this up, but there's a quirk to biomechanics, and I haven't figured out why this works, but if you have someone reach down to grab a kettlebell between their feet, and it's someone who is not used to exercise, they will do what you were showing, which is curling the back, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you set that kettlebell out on the floor to where they're looking down at like a 45-degree angle and then say reach out, now obviously they can't reach it, it's past their reach, but as you reach for it, that reaching out keeps the back in a more neutral posture. So they sit down, they reach out. So that's another thing that I've used before is if I can't get someone to keep that back neutral while they're hinging, I'll set something out in front of them, beyond their reach, and just reach out. And for whatever reason, I don't know if you've encountered this or not. Like I said, I can't remember where I picked this up. Somehow that helps. And I don't know if it's the reaching out helps with the center of gravity and the
That's
balance.
the most likely culprit because they
Yeah.
have to push their butt back to not fall.
hmm
Yeah, and
And
I've used that especially in my geriatric training
mm,
quite a bit. Yeah.
yeah. So that's another trick I'll use when I'm trying to teach someone to hip hinge. Uh, like I said, it's especially if it's, you know, a desk jockey who's really out of shape or someone who's never been very active. These kinds of uh explanations don't always make sense. You have to try and keep getting regressive to find a way to make this make sense. If you want a good a more in-depth, because I like that because it's only 7 minutes long and none of us have attention spans anymore. I've mentioned before search Brett Contreras butt wink. And this is like a 7, 8 year old video. He did this a while
Yeah,
ago.
you showed that on this channel
Okay.
one time where he has a skeleton and he keeps
Yep.
dropping it. Yeah.
He's got the little skelly.
That was
And
one of the things that gave me the confidence to do this because I was like, this is one of the best guys in the business, and this video is bad, and it's still
it's
got
not
a
a good
million
video.
views.
Yeah, his videos now are much better, but that's because he's got a videographer and an editor.
They're over edited now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he explains where the butt wink comes from, but also with the skeleton, you can see what's happening there as he articulates and he moves it around. Speaking of seeing, since we were talking about this, I wanted to bring this up. Can I share?
I think
Yes,
you
I
can.
can. This guy. Here we go. All right. So,
Oh.
this is what we're looking at when we're talking about the back. And to me, I used to have a picture like this on my phone. So if I was explaining to someone, boom, bring this up real quick. That's a lot of connective tissue,
Mm-hmm.
right?
The thoracolumbar fascia.
Mm-hmm. So you got
TLF, not to be confused with the TFL I talked about earlier.
yes.
Yeah.
So you got a big honking muscle here, the lat, one of the bigger muscles in the body. You've got a big honking muscle group here, the glutes, and they connect across this connective tissue. So this is why low back injuries are so easy, because there's just not a lot of muscle there, because there's connective tissue to make the upper and lower body work together.
Well,
So
if you count connective tissue as part of the muscle, which it is an extension of the muscle, then it's actually probably the most powerful junction in the body.
connective tissue is, I mean, it's like a strong rubber, or it should be like a strong rubber band. So, but if you don't use it or you overuse it, then a rubber band don't work. It becomes brittle or it becomes slack. So I use rubber bands as an analogy a lot for connective tissue. That
Yeah, I hate the rubber band because it shouldn't have a lot of stretch to it.
yeah,
The muscle itself is where you get most of the stretch.
I have not found a better illustration, so I keep using the rubber band because I haven't figured out a better way to do it.
Yeah, it shouldn't have a lot of play to it. Well, just like when we were fishing, the guy was talking about the differences in the line, and what he didn't like about the braided line is there wasn't a whole lot of give to it. That should be the way the fascia is versus the muscle itself, which should have a lot of stretch to it.
Yeah.
So the muscle itself, again, the rubber band doesn't work because it can contract.
Yeah.
But it
So this is you can't stress a big chunk of connective tissue like this like you can muscle. To your point, it's the problem with the analogy is because the muscle you do want to stretch, you do want to move, you do want to elongate, but the connective tissue needs to be better protected. That's why you stress the proper movement. That's why what is it, the three things is a positive result on the tissue, positive impact on the tissue.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're curling your back or butt winking, so overextending your back, you're stretching that connective tissue beyond where it is safe. And so that's why we're harping on that lordotic curve in your lumbar. That is supposed to be there. That's where its stability comes from. So don't push it out one way or another.
Bring that picture back up. Let me see if I can do something here. Yeah, I think you can draw on this. But I don't know if I can do it if it's your screen. View options.
I thought you could. Can't you bring up the whiteboard if I'm sharing?
Well, no, it's not the whiteboard. It's under the options of the share screen that you can pencil. Oh crap. Oh, here it is. Ha. There we go. Let's see. Are you getting a drawing there?
Yep.
Okay, let me make it. Can I make it bigger or a different color that's going to show up a little bit better? Let's see. Well, red won't work better because all the muscles are there. Let's try orange. Orange always shows up.
I didn't think you could see orange.
No, orange is the only color colorblind people can see.
Oh, okay.
There we go. There's a big orange. Yeah, we're going to have to do black or something. There we go. All right. Oh, that's why it's not, it's kind of opaque or translucent. How do I make this? All right, we'll figure this out better, but we'll do the best we can for right now. Okay, so if we look at the muscles, you got a diamond in your TLF, right? And they interact in this way. Now, here's one of the takeaways from the way your body interacts with the different muscles that all connect into each other. Think of it like everything playing a tug of war. And if one side is winning, then the other side will overreact. And we've got a very dynamic structure here because not only is this playing tug of war with this, but this and this combined is playing tug of war with this and this combined. So we've got the synergistic effect and we've got the antagonistic effect. So if one of these is winning, can I erase all that? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so if one of these is winning, that whole diamond structure, because it doesn't stretch very well, is going to shift in one direction or another. So that may end up the whole thing might center itself a little bit over here. Then we got no bueno problems because now it's not supporting the structure it needs to. The other side is going to spasm in response. All of these structures, this guy right here that's underneath that they have cut open here.
Yeah, that's why I like this because you see the lat on the side, but you see all those crisscrossy things underneath it.
That's your quadratus lumborum, which is actually there's a paragraph in the Ultimate Back Fitness Guide, which is about this big in a 400-page textbook, specifically on the QL, because there's not a whole lot to say about it other than it's the prime symptom of all the other problems. Because this is the muscle. It goes from your rib cage to your hip and then connects in 4 places on your vertebra. And so it connects to L1, L2, L3, L4. I think that's right. But lumbar spine, four spots on there, and then connects your rib cage to your pelvis. And it's a support muscle. And when you ask what does it stabilize, the answer is yes. So that's lateral movement, side to side. That's up and down. That's the vertebrae shifting forward and backwards. That's them curving too much one direction or another. Front, back, side to side, all of these. The only movement it has anything to do with is it slightly hikes your hip, which is what happens when you walk. So that way you can clear the ground to make it to the next step. You can unshare that. No. But most of the time, if you have unspecified back pain, you have a QL issue. But the QL issue isn't the QL. It's the issue is something else isn't working. So if you have that diamond in the middle shifting in any direction, or shear force in the spine because that's not staying centered, or you're not using your butt to lift, you're using your spinal erectors to lift, or anything there, your QL goes, oh, I'm not made for that. Well, guess what? Yeah, fuck you. And that's basically what happens. And then once it spasms, almost the end result of any spasm is a sprain, or strain. Strain is muscle. So it is a strain. And now you've got muscle damage. And just like if you've ever been the most sore you've ever been in your life, that's a mild strain. And so however long it took you to get out of that, that's how long it's going to take to recover from that. Except, oh my gosh, it can't do its job the way it's supposed to, so it spasms again, and it spasms again, and it spasms again, and you get in this circle, this ever living cycle of it not doing the right thing because something else is messed up. But you feel the pain in that one spot. It's not the problem. The problem is whatever is off kilter. And if you're not hinging, I guarantee 100% your QLs are firing up every time you bend over to pick something up.
I don't know if you've ever done this before, but a progression on from the stuff you talked about in the video is doing a hip thrust off of a stability ball with your back on a stability ball. The point is not to give you extra work because you're on an unstable surface. The reason I use it is because an easy way to tell if you're doing the hip thrust properly is that the ball's not going to move.
Yeah, that the ball keeps you honest.
So if you're rolling backwards when you do that,
you're pressing with the quads. You're extending the knees to lift yourself up.
So once you've done those various mobility training routines to work the hip hinge form, and you feel like you're ready to start, working the muscle, I graduate to 3-second holds on a stability ball because you're going to get those glutes firing, and the movement, the ball is going to tell you if you're doing the movement properly.
And even on the ground, if you don't have a lot of equipment, or if you're just starting, pick your toes up and then bridge, because now you can't dig your toes in and push against the ground. You have to push your heel down versus pushing out. So that's another way to do that. I had a thought while you were talking and then I forgot. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Well, work that stuff in the hip hinge though, because as you say, if you can't do a hinge, you're not going to be able to do a squat.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, and then so that's closed chain. Closed chain is the hip hinge. So your feet are attached to the ground. Now, this is another reason it's so important, because you have to master that first, but then you make it open chain by doing it in a way where you lift your leg. And this is where things like your bird dogs come in, right? Because you're lifting your leg and you're extending it straight out. Let me see if I've got an example of a bird dog for the peoples out there. Oh, crap. Here we go. Bird dog, bird dog. There we go. Okay. So this is the bird dog exercise. Not using pictures of myself because I want to use pictures of myself. I just know it will not cause a copyright issue. So the bird dog, you see, where's my...
And if you don't know why it's called a bird dog, I feel sorry for you having not a fun childhood.
Yeah, where's my drawing? You're not going to let me draw on this one. This is my own. I'm sharing. You won't let me draw on my own share. Okay. Well, but here's my butt. You see that extended out there. So now instead of bending at the hip towards the ground and pushing the butt back, my foot is unconnected from the ground. So that's what I said, closed chained on the other one, open chain here. So my foot is in free space. That's what we call open chain. So the resistance is lifting into the air, the oblivion, right? Versus the resistance being contacted with the ground. Your body responds differently. Now it's important to master this, because an underestimated thing, I joked about the sneeze earlier, even though it was correct. Every step we take is a rep. And if you're not contracting this glute to propel your body forward, you are overusing the external rotators of the hip, the low back, and everything else around it.
Look at the size of the glutes of an Olympic sprinter versus a marathon runner.
Yeah. But even again, not sprinting, walking.
Yeah.
How many steps there's a plus side to the step counter, right? Because people are more active. The downside is if you have bad walking mechanics, you're hurting yourself every step, just so
But
minutely you don't notice it until it
bring that
finally hurts.
picture back up real quick. Speaking of mechanics, there's something weird about the shadows there. That either that or it's my brain. It kind of looks like you're stacking there. So
Oh, like
I
you're saying I'm
yeah,
leaning
yeah.
over.
So I wish you had a straight on view as well.
Let me see if I
Whenever
do.
you're doing single leg stuff, something I mean, now obviously if you're doing like a lateral movement, you're going to move side to side. But if you're doing a bird dog, a lunge, a Bulgarian, an
Did that come
RDL,
up?
there you go.
Yeah, because so
Perfect.
that's an abduction, but yeah, this is
But the point is you want to get to where, and I'm not saying don't do it if you're shifting. The point is be mindful of the shift. You don't want your hips shifting side to side. You don't want to be overcompensating and I'm going to fall over if I don't, shift and stack over that knee that's on the ground. So, I've had a lot of people, okay, look, put the weight down. I know you want to lift. I know you want to get swole, bro, but put the weight down. Focus on the movement. Get next to a rack or a wall or whatever so that you have that balance if you need it, and focus on dropping straight down and dropping straight up. Even if you're doing a lateral movement, you go laterally, you do a squat, you come back up. You shouldn't be wobbling all over the place, right?
also on those quadruped exercises, put a stick across your back.
Mm.
And if it falls, you leaned. Also pay attention to your arms. If one arm bends, you're leaning that way. I guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
But also when you watch people walk, one thing in gait analysis, if this is the center line of my body and you see this while they're walking, well, there you go. They cannot center their weight without shifting it all to one side. And then the first thing is you tell them, and if they still can't control it, then now we've got an issue that we have to work on with those muscles. So, but yeah, if someone talks about chronic back pain and you watch them walk and they walk like this, especially very heavily like this, then I mean, they're step one. They are minutely hurting their back every step they take, especially if it's downstairs.
All right. Well, I think we've beaten the hip hinge to death. Was there anything else you wanted to add to it?
No, I don't think we need to overcomplicate the wheel here, but
Yeah. Hopefully that was good stuff and useful. Um, let's go ahead and stop it there. And for anyone who doesn't want to hear us rant about whatever social thing Sam is going to bring up to make me annoyed.
I think you will be annoyed on this one.
Yeah, everything does these days.
All right. Well, no official advice here other than learn to move properly. And I know a guy, it'll be linked in the show notes below. All right. Talk to you later.